been quite a while since I've attempted a video, and not quite sure what to say in this one. Apologies for any extraneous noise you see or you hear. Currently sat in my car, which I've sort of do most times when I sort of in a reflective mood, or when I do videos themselves. Like I said, if anything comes of this, there's only a few videos on this channel anyway, from another time frame now, 2018, maybe 2019, and we're currently in it's the 22nd of October 2022. So yeah, times have moved on, and I suppose so have I. And it has crossed my mind, ever since sort of doing the last video I did, sort of how to move on, and I suppose that is something we all, in our own way, will come to, when it comes to whatever you think of yourself now. If you really go by sort of the MGTOW moniker, or it's something else entirely, or you're figuring that out. Not that it matters really. It's sort of the clue's in the name with that, I suppose. It's whatever it's your own way, isn't it? It's whatever you figure that out to be. But yeah, I have thought of maybe attempting videos again, and maybe taking the pressure off in a way of specific subjects, or having to come across a certain way. Or I was just thinking before this video, trying to do a test video in a way, sort of see where my mind was at. Of thinking maybe there's an element of bravado with the previous ones in the past, or with me in general, and I sort of accepted that. It's not like that's necessarily wrong. I think it's sort of a process of whatever led you this way, sort of whether it was a gradual thing, or it's something you've always felt, or there was a specific event that spurred it on, or that spurred you, sort of, however you want to look at it, awakening or being thrown into reality, and then your consequent exploration of that. That was sort of a snapshot of me at the time, maybe, and maybe not necessarily, maybe an aspect of me, maybe not necessarily the real me. More in the sense of how I went about it, I suppose. I mean, again, like I said, having to come across a certain way, or having to hide yourself, I suppose. Whether it's sort of a safety element, or not, I suppose an element of not really knowing who you are. It's like a rebirth, I suppose, isn't it, in a way? And it could be several, I've noticed. When I was talking to myself, which sounds strange, but I've done many a video, beyond sort of the few MGTOW themed ones, if you want to call them that. Many videos over the course of the last, 5.5 years. And I think it's one of these, the idea that you're sort of several people, or several versions throughout your life of you. It's not like it's anything that's ever really super static. I suppose you can feel that way sometimes, but it can be also, you can have those, maybe not necessarily epiphany moments, but I've had a few where you sort of think, it feels like it's all of a sudden like your mind has shifted, and you think, crap, when did this happen? Is it literally happening now, or is it you know, maybe as I thought about it more, it was probably something that was happening happening all the time and evolving in its own way, and just needed time, or it needed to breathe, or it needed you to do certain things, or your mind to go certain places, or explore certain ideas. I think is often the case. It's like when you're not necessarily focusing on it is when maybe things actually click into place a little bit. You know, maybe the idea of, you know, why we sleep is for your mind to make sense of what has been going on in your brain, and, you know, sort of repair and regeneration. Maybe that is something that happens also with this idea of rebirth in this way of it's, you're not even necessarily super conscious of it happening. You maybe will just at one point or another think, I feel slightly different now, or, you know, it can probably feel quite sudden because you become suddenly cognizant of it, but it's sort of been there all the time, sort of working in the background. I suppose if you're sort of actually trying to help yourself, you know, which isn't a criticism of myself or anybody else really, you know, it can be hard enough just carrying on sometimes, especially initially. So the fact that you do is a battle won in itself, and I think that's when the healing and this sort of process can start. Is the very act of you carry on breathing is a sign of movement and change, you know, in its own way, no matter how small. So yeah, as it is probably painfully obvious to anybody who actually happens upon this video, it is going to be a bit of, or maybe a lot of spitballing, and at least initially, and if I carry on, you know, because I've sort of been inspired in a way, primarily by myself, but or something within myself needing to do it. But I recently watched a few of well, he calls himself Lazarus now, but Messenger Rising also, which is how I originally found him, of his sort of few videos that he's done recently, and the channel recommendation one, which is sort of in a, I don't know if inspiration is the right word really, maybe it's awakened something again, or maybe the needs for like a bit of self-examination or self-reflection, or I don't know. I suppose particular to me, sort of an element of shadow work, of, you know, unfinished business in a way. You know, there was a point of working past things, or, you know, it can feel like sort of fighting against something, and, you know, finding your own reasons to live again. But also there's other people like Red Mind Man is a guy who's I know, come up with a few people who again has sort of awakened something in the way he tries to approach his videos. You know, it's not necessarily about creating as big a channel as you can, or as many followers as you can. In a way, it's a record of your own meditations, I suppose. You know, like Marcus Aurelius never really intending his own meditations to be put out there for other people to read or be published or anything like that. Not that, you know, you think of anything you come up with as something that's so grandiose, or as, I suppose, as influential, but it's your own version of it, your own personal version of it. and I sort of like the way he approaches his, and it's definitely been helpful in a way, some of his content as well. Amongst others, I think he's the most obvious one, you know, of the past however many months. And I don't know, it's finding my own voice, you know, trying to not speak in a third person, my own voice. And not necessarily, you know, to influence anybody else or even be heard, really. It's sort of for your own sake, isn't it? You know, it's probably many points in your life, if you have any degree of intelligence, where you sort of feel lost or not really knowing what to do with yourself. And sort of, I forget where I got it from now, but I thought about it just before this video too, about, you know, beyond your ground zero, whatever that is, whatever sort of led you down the path you're on, there is a sort of what now, you know, you sort of, whatever metaphor you want to apply to it, you know, you've scaled the wall or you've made your way out of the pit. It's once the end credits, in a way, on that story have rolled, you have a sort of a what now. I don't know if it's right to call it moment, because it's not necessarily one pivotal sort of moment, but necessarily. And you know, every man has to decide what that is for himself. That's the tricky part, isn't it? I suppose. I know, you know, I suppose in a way you're sort of you're living in the real world, and you have so many wake up calls in a way. You know, a new like way you view the world, or red pills, or whatever you want to call it. There is a part of you that wants to be shown the way or given a sort of magical answer, or, you know, words that I've got sick of thinking and saying to myself, purpose and meaning, because in a way they can feel like there's roadblocks you're placing in front of yourself, you know, as in it's pressure in a way. And sort of, maybe the only thing to do is sort of a more mindful mindset or present mindset of, you can will your life away, I suppose, with all those things, when all you ever really have is like now and this day, and, you know, the consequent days, and then enjoy every day for what it brings you, and sort of not what necessarily it just brings you. It's sort of like it's what you make of it, I suppose, not just what comes your way. I think that's one of those things, like expecting the world to give you something, isn't it? It's what you've got to. It's what you've got to grasp yourself, which in itself has been a big thing with me, of a lot of whys in my mind, I suppose. Why do this? Why do that? Even the smallest sort of thing, you think, well, why am I doing it? And it can lead to a very potent sense of listlessness, or just point, you know, you could just, what is the point of anything? Which, you know, you can tie it in a way to sort of like the sense of malaise. I mean, what I always think of in terms of like the manosphere, or whatever you want to call it, is like the red pill malaise. I think it's Stardust stroke thinking gate video. And you know, the problems it can sort of cause you with thinking life is sort of linear in a way, as in, you know, even if you think about grief cycles, you know, you can be back and forth along it. It's not just like one continuous gradual upwards trajectory along one straight line. And the unfortunate thing being, you know, no one will ever give you an answer. And in a way, in a way, you know, is searching for an answer yourself, sort of doing yourself a disservice. It's sort of like remove the questions and the answers. I don't know. It's not like me saying this is right and this is wrong. It's sort of me trying to figure shit out, basically. Or sort through the jumble of thoughts. You know, I've thought about motivation and discipline and whatever. What do you apply those to? And you know, you don't solely rely on motivation for anything. You've got to be disciplined, and that will get you through the tougher days, and the motivation will stem from that at certain times. But again, you know, you can have, I don't know if anybody else relates, I'm sure some people must do. You sort of think, but I've got to have something to tie my discipline to. Which I suppose I do in a way, but again, I think it can be difficult for me, at least, for the black pill stuff not to sort of tick in, or sort of tick over into everything. Really, your mind can be too on all the time, and it stops your just basic enjoyment of things, or some things you get something from, whatever it is. You know, I just think of like my weight training or exercise. My brain could just interfere with that all the time, and I know I'm not the only one with that. I can be very disciplined with that, but there's times where you just think, I don't know, you question it, I suppose. And maybe that's just a natural human thing to happen with our over-evolved brains, over-engineered, whatever you want to call it. You know, I've thought, you know, the answer is less thoughts, not more thoughts. But, you know, how do you do that? But yeah, I mean, I don't really know. Obviously, this is just a completely all over the place sort of diatribe of nonsense. But maybe try and pin down a few things I'd like to talk about or explore. Because again, the goal isn't necessarily to. I don't know. I don't even know what my sort of goal, if any, was from the previous videos I did. You know, the few years ago. Maybe it was just something to tie my flag to, or whatever. You know, it's literally this floating in the sea, and you just needed something. You know, there's something to apply my mind to, or it's not like that has to be the same thing over and over again. I mean, I suppose it's great if you find something you're massively passionate about. Maybe that's half the problem. You know, I say you know way too much, so I apologise for that for anyone who's had to endure it. You know, getting over something, whatever it is, whatever happened to you, or whatever continues to happen to you. It's difficult, but it's the trials of life, isn't it? And I suppose you need those to sort of juxtapose against the good, or the good you can make for yourself. And I suppose once you've made progress, or you feel like in a way certain jobs are complete, if anything is that done with, maybe you can lose sight of the good, or again, I'll talk about Dusk again, like this, the memory of freedom. That's a video I've come back to a few times, of like you can lose a sense of what you do have until it's at risk. Again, this thing of you don't appreciate your legs and your arms, something simple as that, until there's something wrong with them. And it's an insane thing to think about when you put it in those terms, you know, that deep sense of appreciation. Or I suppose it's that the gratitude. It doesn't have to be something, you know, after you be massively cognizant of all the time. It's all like, well, I get to do this, and that's a good thing. It doesn't have to be big or necessarily small. It's just something that is. But there's always something that drives you to, I don't know, there can be an inherent drive, if drive's even the right word. Again, this search for meaning, whatever that means for you. You know, once you've got beyond that, you know, if it was like a marriage breakdown or a breakup or a divorce or whatever consequently comes with that, and something you maybe you're stuck with for a long time, you know, my word with my own situation, it's nowhere near, it's probably a drop in the ocean compared to what some guys have to go through and continue to go through. But again, it's your own personal battle, isn't it? It's not necessarily, you shouldn't diminish your own, I suppose. You should definitely take stock sometimes and sort of appreciate how far you've come and take pride in that. You know, I've told myself that, and you shouldn't feel stupid for doing it, of like, be proud of yourself and allow yourself to feel that sometimes. Otherwise, what's the fucking point of living? I suppose, you know, there could be definitive hard points in life, things that actually happen. I often think this of like, and then I'll beat myself up if and when those things happen for being like this, you know, the existential crises or whatever you want to call it. Like, why the fuck was I worrying about those things when this has happened now? But it's just how you are at the time, I suppose. And for any of it to mean anything, I think you have to sort of take care of yourself and speak well of yourself. And I feel a hypocrite saying a lot of this stuff a lot of the time, you know, because who's like that all the time? I suppose you have to have those moments where you forcefully remind yourself of this, of like, geez, I need to take my foot off the pedal a bit with this. You know, not even something if it's physical or mental. I've often thought that of I may not have necessarily physically moved in space and time, but my mind's walked thousands and thousands of miles, sort of figuratively speaking. You know, this mental fatigue is, you sort of feel it, and you've got to give yourself credit for that, I suppose. Or, you know, not even this necessarily give yourself credit for anything. You sort of like appreciate that. If like, you've got to look after yourself, or at least have those moments where you think, fuck, I have done all right, actually. You know, you may not have trophies to show for it, or medals, or, you know, got a massively paying job, or got all this external stuff to show for it. But it's like fighting your internal battles and overcoming whatever demons you have in a way, or, you know, finding a way to face them day to day sometimes when you're at your worst, I suppose, or at the start. That's a massive thing. Bar all the, especially with certain things like this person's this person's that, women are this, women are that, which I completely get. It comes a point where, depending on how you live your life, I suppose, where it's beyond that, and it's solely about you, which is that's all it's ever been about anyway. No matter what kind of life you're living, there's only one person you're with 100% of the time, and that's the one that's between your ears. So again, I'm as bad as anybody else for needing reminding about it. You've got to sort of speak well of yourself, because in a way that's the only opinion that should matter. The good and the bad externally, what do they amount to? Really nothing if you're not speaking well of yourself. So I don't really know if this sort of counts. I think the initial idea, or one of the ideas I had for a video, was how I sort of felt about the whole MGTOW idea, or my place within it as an abstract concept. But maybe I'll try and focus in on that. It'll end up being the same goddamn video, am I kidding? Of me rambling nonsense. But yeah, I suppose, where I was, not even those initial videos, because those were sort of like a year or a bit out of like what I see as sort of a ground zero for me. How I feel about it all now, and maybe my motivation for doing this, if I put it up. I think I probably will, and whatever comes of it comes of it. Like I say, it's not necessarily about, with certain people, it's about as many people as possible, and I think there can be good reasons for that, of course. The more not influential, I don't like saying that, but I'm sure some of you guys will have, the people you like listening to, or you go to and you subscribe to, and you like what they have to say, or at least you have that space to listen to something. You accept and reject what you do. Like anything, it's been constantly shifting sands with it, and people come and go, and many of the people I started listening to along the way have come and gone in turn, and I think that's the whole point, isn't it? You get to a point where, especially with the guys who are sort of on similar roads of like self-exploration, or something has happened, or many things have happened, and they've got to a point where they're working through things. You get to a stage where you move beyond where you were, and that can include sort of making videos, or I don't know. It served its purpose in a way, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I sort of get it. There can be times where you sort of think, with people you were necessary, I suppose you found you've any kinship with, or were important to you at a certain point in your life, like anything, there's relatively few people who actively encourage massive change in life constantly. I think it's a thing of like you like, in a way, you like the knowable quantities, and maybe you sort of forget there was a time where that wasn't there, or they weren't there, or it wasn't there. So you're always capable of moving on and getting through things, and because that's what I suppose what every man has to do in this sort of sphere of whatever that means to you. I think if you stay stagnant and you stay still, saying the same things you did years before, sort of, you've got to hold yourself accountable, I suppose, to a certain point. And that's not to sort of like put anybody down in my, limited experience, because I'm well aware of like there's some things many people can't escape or aren't allowed to escape. But I suppose at least if you're willing to sort of explore where your mind is at, which is all I'm trying to do really. And not necessarily hide behind anything, or I suppose hide from myself, because I always think I've always been a sort of person that I suppose I wouldn't really know how to do that. I am who I am, and I don't know. I will start like half an hour. I think is enough, isn't it? If anybody has got this far, well done to you. I don't know why you would. I'm sure I'll figure out why I am doing this. In a roundabout way, if nothing else. Maybe, to use sort of well, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like the whole point of MGTOW to me was sort of getting to that point of like, well, it's discovering what your own way is. It's not just staying where you were, and part of that process is losing things, no matter what it is. That can be your starting point is losing something, and knowing that skins you shed your skin, irrespective of whether you want to or not, or whether you're aware that it's happening. And part of that is other people moving on, or things changing. I think I've rambled enough, so I'll perhaps stick this up and add to it maybe. So I will say bye for now. Goodbye.